Chapter 1. My name is Josh Everett, and up until last month, I led a pretty uneventful life. I worked as a night shift security guard at a warehouse in a small town called Pine Creek, Oregon. It's one of those towns where everyone knows each other, and the biggest excitement is the high school football game on Fridays. Life was simple, predictable, even comforting in its monotony. I lived in a modest apartment above a diner on Main Street. Mornings were spent with a coffee in hand, staring out at the sleepy town coming to life. It was a peaceful place, surrounded by dense woods and misty hills. There were stories, of course, every town has them, whispers of strange occurrences deep in the forest. But they were just stories, the kind locals told over beers at the pub or around campfires to spook the kids. One legend, though, stuck with me. It was about a woman called Eliza Graves, a widow who supposedly lived on the outskirts of town a century ago. They said she went mad with grief after losing her husband in a hunting accident. The story goes that she practiced dark rituals, trying to bring him back. Her spirit was said to linger, cursed to haunt those who dared to speak her name aloud after dark. I never gave it much thought. Superstitions, I figured. Something the old-timers used to keep kids from wandering too far into the woods. But one night, during a quiet shift, something changed. It was 2 a.m., and the warehouse was dead silent except for the occasional hum of the fluorescent lights. I was scrolling through my phone when a message popped up in the group chat I had with a few friends from town. "Josh, ever heard of the Eliza Graves dare?" It was from Matt, my best friend since high school. I chuckled. "What dare?" I typed back. "Say her name 3 times after midnight. See what happens," he replied, followed by a series of laughing emojis. "Come on, man. You don't believe that crap, do you?" I responded. "Bet you won't do it." "Scared?" I rolled my eyes. Typical Matt, always trying to stir something up. "Fine. I'll do it. Just to prove it's nonsense." I waited for the clock to tick past midnight, feeling slightly foolish. It was just a game. Nothing would happen. "Eliza Graves," I said softly, my voice echoing through the empty warehouse. Nothing. Eliza Graves. A chill ran down my spine, but I shook it off. The building was always cold at night. Eliza Graves. The words hung in the air, heavier than I expected. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the lights flickered. My heart skipped a beat. Faulty wiring, I muttered to myself, trying to calm my nerves. But then I heard it, a soft, distant whisper. My name. Josh. I froze. The whisper wasn't coming from the intercom or the radio. It felt like it was right behind me. Slowly, I turned around. The warehouse was empty, just rows of shelves and stacked crates. But the air felt different, thicker, charged with an unsettling energy. I shook my head, laughing nervously. "Get a grip, Josh. You're imagining things." Just as I turned back to my desk, my phone buzzed again. It was another message from Matt. "Dude, are you okay? Your camera feed just went weird." Confused, I opened the security app on my phone to check the live feed. The footage from the warehouse floor was static for a few seconds before clearing up. And there, standing in the middle of the aisle, was a figure. A woman, draped in a tattered black dress, her hair hanging like a curtain over her face. I blinked, my mind scrambling to make sense of it. No way. This has to be a prank. I looked up from my phone, scanning the warehouse floor from the observation window. It was empty. When I glanced back at the feed, the figure was gone. Chapter 2. The next day, I couldn't shake the unease. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, maybe even a glitch in the camera system. Still, I found myself glancing over my shoulder more often than usual. The warehouse seemed darker, quieter, as if something unseen lingered in the shadows. That evening, I stopped by the diner for dinner. Matt was there, sitting in our usual booth. I slid into the seat across from him. "You look like hell, man," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Didn't sleep well," I muttered. He grinned. "Let me guess. Eliza Graves?" I glared at him. "It's not funny, Matt. Come on, it's just a story. You're not actually scared, are you?" Before I could respond, the waitress, a middle-aged woman named Marcy, came over with our coffees. She glanced at me, her expression curious. "You boys talking about Eliza Graves?" she asked. Matt chuckled. "Yeah. Just messing around." Marcy didn't laugh. Instead, her face grew serious. "You shouldn't mess with things you don't understand." Matt rolled his eyes. "It's just a story." "Stories come from somewhere," Marcy said quietly. "My grandmother used to say that speaking her name calls her spirit. She'd always warn us never to say it after dark." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Did you ever see anything?" I asked. Marcy hesitated before nodding slowly. "Not me. But my sister did. She said she saw a woman standing in the woods outside our house one night. Black dress, long hair. Just standing there, watching." Matt waved her off. "Old wives' tales. Nothing more." But I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcy's story was more than just a tale. Chapter 3. The night after my conversation with Marcy and Matt, I returned to the warehouse with a lingering unease. Every creak of the floorboards and hum of the machines felt amplified, pressing in on me. I tried to shake it off, chalking it up to a restless mind. But something was different tonight. The warehouse felt colder, darker, as though the shadows stretched further than they should. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with another message from Matt. "Still alive?" he joked, followed by a ghost emoji. I smirked and shook my head. "You're an idiot," I typed back, but even as I hit send, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The lights flickered again, plunging the warehouse into brief darkness before the fluorescent bulbs buzzed back to life. My heart jumped. I checked the camera feed, half expecting to see that figure again. But the screen showed nothing unusual. Rows of crates and shelves stood undisturbed. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. "Get a grip, Josh," I muttered to myself. But just as I was starting to relax, the sound of a faint, rhythmic tapping echoed through the warehouse. Tap. 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 I shot up from my seat, my eyes darting around the room. The tapping was soft but persistent, like fingernails drumming on wood. I grabbed my flashlight and slowly made my way toward the source of the sound. My footsteps echoed eerily in the cavernous space. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. No response. The tapping continued, leading me down one of the aisles between towering shelves. As I walked, I noticed something odd. The air grew colder with each step, and my breath became visible in the dim light. Finally, I reached the end of the aisle. There, on the floor, was a single wooden box, slightly ajar. The tapping had stopped. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. Something inside me screamed to turn back, but curiosity got the better of me. I knelt down and slowly lifted the lid. Inside was an old, dusty mirror. Its frame was ornate, carved with strange symbols I didn't recognize. I picked it up carefully, wiping away the dust to get a better look. That's when I saw her. In the reflection, standing right behind me, was the woman from the camera feed. Her face was still obscured by her long, dark hair, but her presence was undeniable. I spun around, flashlight sweeping the area, but there was no one there. My hands shook as I placed the mirror back in the box. I backed away slowly, heart racing, and nearly tripped over my own feet. As I turned to leave the aisle, the tapping started again. Tap. 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 Only this time, it wasn't distant. It was right next to me. Josh. The whisper sent chills down my spine. I bolted, sprinting toward the observation room, slamming the door behind me. My hands fumbled to lock it, but before I could, the lights in the warehouse went out completely. Pitch black. I scrambled to find my phone, using its screen as a makeshift flashlight. My fingers trembled as I called Matt. Pick up, I whispered, glancing nervously at the darkened warehouse floor through the window. The line rang once, twice, before connecting. Josh. What's up? Matt sounded groggy. She's here, I whispered. What? Who? Eliza Graves. I saw her. There was a pause on the other end. Are you messing with me? Because if you are, I'm not. I snapped, panic creeping into my voice. She's real, Matt. I saw her reflection in a mirror, and now she's. A loud crash interrupted me. One of the shelves had toppled over, sending boxes tumbling to the floor. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering to the ground. Josh. Josh. Matt's voice echoed faintly from the speaker. I grabbed the phone, heart pounding. I need to get out of here. Wait, don't leave. Matt shouted. Just stay on the line. I'm coming to get you. I didn't argue. I needed to hear a familiar voice, anything to ground me in reality. I kept the flashlight trained on the door, my back pressed against the wall. The tapping resumed, louder this time, as though someone was knocking directly on the observation room door. Tap. 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 Matt, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. She's outside the door. Don't open it. Stay put. I'm almost there. But as I watched, the tapping grew more insistent. The doorknob rattled, and a low, guttural whisper filled the air. Josh. Let me in. No, I whimpered, clutching the phone tighter. No, no, no. The door creaked, bending inward as though something was pressing against it from the other side. I backed away, tripping over the chair and falling to the floor. Matt, hurry. I'm here. I heard the distant sound of his truck pulling up outside. "Stay inside. Don't move." Suddenly, the door burst open, and the tapping stopped. There was nothing there. Just silence and the echo of my ragged breathing. Moments later, Matt burst into the room, flashlight in hand. He looked around, confused. "Where is she?" he asked, panting. I shook my head, unable to speak. Matt helped me to my feet. "Come on. We're getting out of here." As we left the warehouse, I glanced back one last time. In the glass window of the observation room, I saw her reflection again. Watching. Waiting. And as we drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had unleashed something far worse than a ghost story. Chapter 4. As Matt and I sped away from the warehouse, my mind raced. The image of that woman, Eliza Graves, lingered in my thoughts. Her dark, haunting figure seemed to be etched into my memory. The silence in the truck was suffocating, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. I could feel Matt's occasional glances, but I stared straight ahead, gripping the dashboard with trembling hands. We pulled into Matt's driveway, the tires crunching against the gravel. His house sat on the outskirts of town, surrounded by tall pine trees that swayed gently in the wind. The place should have felt safe, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "Come on," Matt said, breaking the silence. "Let's figure out what the hell is going on." Inside, Matt brewed a pot of coffee while I paced nervously in the living room. The walls were lined with old photographs and hunting trophies, but even in the familiar setting, I felt like I didn't belong. "You sure you're okay?" Matt asked, setting a steaming mug in front of me. I shook my head. "No. I'm not okay. That wasn't just a story, Matt. She's real. And she's coming for me." Matt sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I know it's freaky, but there has to be a logical explanation. Maybe it was someone messing with you. A prank." I shot him a glare. "Does this look like a prank to you?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the footage from the warehouse. The image of Eliza standing in the aisle sent a shiver down my spine. Matt's face paled as he watched. "Okay," he admitted, setting the phone down. "That's creepy. But what do we do now?" Before I could answer, the lights flickered, and the house was plunged into darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of the moon filtering through the curtains. "Power's out," Matt muttered, grabbing a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. He handed me one, and we both stood in tense silence. Tap. 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 The sound came from the front door. My heart skipped a beat as Matt aimed his flashlight toward the entrance. "Stay here," he whispered, moving cautiously toward the door. I wanted to protest, but fear rooted me in place. Matt peeked through the peephole. "There's no one there." He unlocked the door and opened it a crack. The cold night air rushed in, sending goosebumps down my arms. "See? Nothing." Suddenly, the door slammed shut with a force that knocked Matt backward. I rushed to his side, helping him to his feet. "Josh," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Look." On the door, etched into the wood, was a single word. "Eliza." My stomach churned. "She's here." Without warning, a loud crash echoed from the back of the house. We spun around, flashlights sweeping the room. "Josh," Matt said, his voice barely audible. "We need to get out of here." But as we moved toward the front door, the tapping resumed. This time, it was coming from every direction: windows, walls, even the floor beneath us. It was as if the house itself was alive with the sound. "Stop!" I shouted, covering my ears. "Just stop!" The noise ceased, replaced by a deafening silence. Then, a whisper. "Josh! Josh! Let me in." I backed away, shaking my head. "No. No, this isn't real." Matt grabbed my arm. "We need to go. Now." But as we turned to leave, the figure of Eliza Graves appeared at the end of the hallway. Her black dress billowed as if caught in an invisible wind. Her face remained hidden beneath her long hair, but her presence was suffocating. "Josh," she whispered, her voice echoing in the stillness. "You called me." I stumbled backward, my mind racing. "What do you want?" "To be remembered," she said, her voice laced with sorrow. "To make them see." Matt stepped forward, his flashlight trembling in his hand. "Stay back." Eliza tilted her head, as if amused by his defiance. Then, in a flash, she lunged toward him. Matt screamed, his flashlight clattering to the floor as he was thrown against the wall. "Matt!" I shouted, rushing to his side. But Eliza was already standing between us, her dark figure looming over me. "You spoke my name," she whispered. "And now, you will carry my story." Before I could react, she reached out, her icy fingers brushing against my temple. A flood of images overwhelmed me, visions of her life, her grief, her descent into madness. I saw her standing in the woods, performing rituals under the moonlight. I saw the townsfolk shunning her, calling her a witch. And I saw her death, alone and forgotten. When the vision stopped, I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. "Why me?" I croaked. Eliza knelt beside me, her voice soft. "Because you listened. You remembered." With that, she began to fade, her figure dissolving into shadow. The house fell silent once more, save for my ragged breathing. Matt groaned, stirring beside me. What happened?" I helped him sit up, my mind still reeling. "I don't know. But I think it's over." As we stumbled out of the house and into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Eliza was gone, for now. But her story remained, etched into my mind. And I knew one thing for certain, I would never speak her name again. Chapter 5. The following days passed in a blur. I didn't return to the warehouse. Matt and I agreed to stay quiet about what had happened. There was no way to explain it without sounding insane. But even as I tried to push it all aside, I couldn't escape the lingering sense of dread. At night, I barely slept. Shadows seemed to stretch longer, whispers danced in the corners of my mind, and every little noise made me jump. The name Eliza Graves echoed in my thoughts like a curse I couldn't shake. One evening, as I sat in my apartment, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Matt. "Need to talk. Meet me at the diner." Reluctantly, I grabbed my coat and headed out. The streets of Pine Creek felt emptier than usual, as if the town itself was holding its breath. When I arrived at the diner, Matt was already there, sitting in our usual booth with a cup of coffee. He looked exhausted, his eyes hollow. "You okay?" I asked as I slid into the seat across from him. He shook his head. "No. She's not gone." I froze. "What do you mean?" Matt leaned in, lowering his voice. "Last night, I heard tapping on my window. I thought it was just my mind playing tricks, but then I saw her. I felt a chill run down my spine." "In your house?" He nodded. "I don't think she ever really left, Josh. She's tied to us now." The weight of his words settled heavily in my chest. We had unleashed something we didn't understand, and now it was following us. "I've been doing some research," Matt continued, pulling out a worn notebook. "Eliza Graves wasn't just a local legend. There are records of her in other towns, stories of her appearing wherever her name was spoken." I flipped through the pages, seeing old newspaper clippings and handwritten notes. The stories were eerily similar: people whispering her name, strange occurrences, disappearances. "How do we stop her?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. Matt shook his head. "I don't know if we can. But maybe we can pass her story on to someone else." The suggestion hung in the air like a poison. "You mean curse someone else?" I whispered. Matt looked away, guilt etched across his face. "I don't see another way. If we don't, she'll keep coming for us. And it'll get worse." I felt sick. The idea of deliberately condemning someone else to this nightmare was horrifying. But the alternative was unthinkable. Before I could respond, the diner's lights flickered, casting the room into brief darkness. When they came back on, a shadowy figure stood outside the window. Eliza. Her hair hung in damp strands, her dress torn and dirty. Her eyes, dark and hollow, locked onto mine. "She's here," I whispered, my heart pounding. Matt stood up, panic in his eyes. "We need to go. Now." We rushed out of the diner, stumbling into the street. The air felt heavy, oppressive, as if the very night was pressing down on us. Eliza's figure remained by the window, watching us silently. "Where do we go?" I asked, my voice trembling. Matt shook his head. "Away from here. As far as we can." We jumped into his truck and sped out of town. The road stretched out before us, winding through the dark woods. But no matter how far we drove, the feeling of being watched never left. After what felt like hours, we pulled over at a rest stop. The moonlight cast eerie shadows across the empty lot. "We can't run forever," I said, my voice breaking. "She'll always find us." Matt buried his face in his hands. "I know." For a long time, we sat in silence, the weight of our situation pressing down on us. Then, slowly, I took out my phone and opened the group chat from that fateful night. "What are you doing?" Matt asked, alarmed. "I'm passing it on," I said, my fingers trembling as I typed. I sent the message, "Ever heard of the Eliza Graves dare?" Within moments, someone replied, "What dare?" My chest tightened with guilt and fear, but I pressed on. "Say her name 3 times after midnight. See what happens." Matt stared at me, horrified. "Josh, you can't." "I have to," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "It's the only way." The phone buzzed again. Another message. "Fine. I'll do it. I closed my eyes, the weight of what I'd done settling over me. The curse would move on, just as it always had. But the guilt would remain, a shadow I could never escape. As we sat in the stillness of the night, I realized that Eliza Graves was more than just a ghost. She was a story that needed to be told. And as long as people listened, she would never truly be gone. Matt and I drove back to Pine Creek in silence, the distant tapping of fingers echoing in my mind. The legend of Eliza Graves would live on. And I knew, deep down, that one day, someone would speak her name again.